from the gym and the pitch to the Chameleon Workplace, and we've got regular Ian Shorthouse and his colleague Stephen O'Leary of Paragon Workplace Solutions to tell us all about that with more data and more survey results, I believe.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Ian Shorthouse, joined today by my colleague Stephen O'Leary, who I'll be passing over to in a moment. Very quickly, I'm pretty sure that many of you won't have heard of Paragon Workplace Solutions. So we work here in the UK, but also with global clients, all things workplace, hence the brand name, managed services, designing and delivering employee experiences, but also we do a lot around workplace effectiveness, workplace performance, and workplace measurement, which is why we link into the Chameleon Workplace report, which we're going to share a few of the headlines with you today. And it will only be headlines, I'm afraid, in 20 minutes, but you will have full access to the full report at the end of the session. So 3 areas we are going to cover in 20 minutes, tall order, but I'm pretty sure we can do it. So we're going to have a look into who is actually shaping the workplace experience at the moment. Is it inclusive? Do people feel heard? Are their voices heard? Have we still got an opportunity to use the workplace as a competitive advantage as part of the employee value proposition? And then finally, the hot topic, which has already been touched on this morning, which is where I hand over to Stephen, the role of AI in the workplace. So the analogy, how do we link this to a chameleon? So the chameleon, I'm sure you will all know, a well-known fact, it's been around for 60 million years. And in that 60 million year period, its habitat has changed, its predators have changed, and it has changed in order to survive. It has developed camera-like eyesight. It has developed the ability, is the eye moving? Not to distract you, that's to distract you from what I'm saying. And it's developed the defensive mechanisms to blend in with the environment. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the workplace won't survive. But in order to thrive and to support business performance and business outcomes, it is having to work much harder than it ever has before. It is a very key source, as we've already heard, about supporting productivity, both individually and collectively. It is a key area for supporting social capital. We work in a very disparate way now. So again, links very nicely to the research. When we do come together, it has a very key purpose to bond people. It needs to work and support that create a sense of inclusion, a sense of belonging, and that is going to be the red thread through the rest of this presentation. But also it's a key part of attracting and retaining talent. And all of that, let's get down to it, it does come down to commercials for businesses. This is all about driving business performance and business success. So what is the return on investment of having that workplace? In order to create that high-performing workplace that we're also passionate about in this room, we are going to depend on how quickly and how we can respond and our ability to learn and adapt. We haven't got 60 million years. Well, I certainly haven't. Before we get into our insight, just to share a couple of numbers from Gallup's latest global survey. Only 23% of employees feel they are thriving at work. 77% of the workforce don't feel engaged. Now that's actually improved. Last year was 83%, so that is moving in the right direction. But when you consider all the data and the science around engagement and the link to productivity, we believe that engaged employees have 17% more productivity than non-engaged, which is probably common sense. And then the last one, which is a phrase we've heard so much about since the pandemic, 59% of individuals are quietly quitting. So why are we seeing all these numbers with so much focus on workplace? And there's one more challenge. When employees select an employer, one of the top reasons they pick it is about the workplace environment and culture. So this poses the question, are we getting the right balance between our focus on the physical attendance versus the employee psychological connection? We talk a lot about the workplace why. We talk about what needs to be different and what needs to improve. But actually one of the key questions is how are we going about that? Every employee has a psychological contract with their employer. The challenge with that is it's not spoken about and it's not written down and the employer doesn't actually know what that is. But if an organisation doesn't behave in a way that's aligned to an employee's values and their expectations, they will make decisions, and those decisions look like quiet quitting and they look like disengagement. And there's a far tighter correlation between psychological contract that employee has than employee engagement when it comes to loyalty and productivity. So, Paragon Workplace Solutions, we have a workplace measurement tool called Optima, and typically we deploy that within organizations. But the latest piece of research, Chameleon Workplace, we deployed it across 1,000 UK employees across 18 sectors. And that's some of the insight I want to share with you to sort of explore that topic. Optima is built around 3 areas: how the workplace enables employees to think, how it impacts how they feel, and how it supports them to do their roles. The think is very much about how it supports cognitive performance, the environment you create around people. For those of you that have read Nigel's book, Workplace Zoo, he talks in there about if you get the right sensory environment, you can see about 5 to 6% improved productivity. So we measure how the workplace actually supports our ability to think and cognitive performance. Feel is that emotional stuff, sense of inclusion, sense of environment, that are you part of a community? Do you feel emotionally connected? And the do is the obvious bit. It's that functional stuff. It's that ability to do your role effectively. Now, when we start to look at this, and we looked at the insight we gleaned from Optima, the first worrying statistic here in terms of how engaged people feel in this process of change is only 39% of employees feel the workplace has been designed with them in mind. First problem. So then the data takes us a bit further. 53% of employees say that the sensory environment is extremely or very important, but only 27% of top executives. Now, that could be a couple of things. It could be, from our data in Optima, we can see that only 9% of top executives are neurodiverse, but across the full sample, 22%. So maybe that sensory environment is less important to the top executives. It could be they've got a fantastic corner office looking over the Thames, so quite frankly, they're perfectly happy with the natural daylight they've got and everything else that they've created around them. I don't know. 48% of employees holding top-level roles say the office location is where they feel most productive, but only 19% of mid-managers. There is a massive discrepancy there. So here's the first red flag. When we look at this and we look at how employees feel about the workplace and it's been designed with them in mind, 70% of top executives believe it has been. They're being heard. Probably not a surprise. The more junior roles, 20%, 21, 23, and a movement through it. First takeaway, beware of the hippo. The highest paid people in the office. Okay? If we are designing the workplace around the most senior people in the organization, we're getting focus groups together. It's the department heads. They're informing it. Wrong. Okay? That is not representative of your organization. It's the most highly paid people being heard. Then we have a look at some discrepancies around gender. Only 26% of women say they've had their suggestions for the workplace improvements actioned. Whether that's right or not, that is the perception, and it's unhealthy. That is versus 41% of men. Only 17% of women say they feel productive in the workplace, with 30% preferring to work from home. That 17% is 28% for men. So again, this is about the how. Are people feeling heard? When we look at generations, sorry, Nigel, 43% of Generation Z employees feel under-supported by the tools and tech. 11% of millennials feel not supported at all. And when you think how important technology is to the younger generations, that is a concern. And then we look at the generational split on the right-hand side there. Numbers of people who feel that the workplace supports their sense of belonging. The forgotten generation, as they're often called, the baby boomers, only 63% versus Generation Z, 83%. So maybe what is important isn't different. Maybe how they use the workplace isn't different. But the perception of being heard for different generational groups, there is a gap. That was the quantitative. We then look at the qualitative data we got from Optima across that 1,000 employees, the 18 sectors. And we created a maturity matrix, very simple, okay? On the left-hand side is the effort those employees feel their organizations are putting into the workplace experience. And on the x-axis is what are they getting from it? So what is the output of that? What are they achieving? And this is to understand the approaches that different organisations and sectors are actually taking. So within this matrix, what we found is there's three things fundamentally influence sectors and organisations. The sector they operate in and the expectations employees have, their culture, but also the level of investment they make. And that investment might not always be monetary. It could be effort and it could be engagement. So we start with our bottom left, static. Now, I should say as well that this isn't binary. There are organisations and sectors that step between these quartiles, okay? But this is what we are seeing from these employee groups. Static, so low effort going into workplace experience and actually low output. Typically, it is public sector, government, health, and education. There are also charities in here, not-for-profit, but also manufacturing. And what's happening here, when you look at and hear from these employees, is they tend to be more product and output-led. The focus is on what they do as an organisation, how they make money. It's functional investment, not workplace investment. It's not about the employee experience. They tend to have long-term tenure employees, low turnover, low risk. So maybe that's the reason there's less investment there. And they are very dependent on subject matter experts and service partners. So low effort, and they're not seeing the output. Then we've got the traditional quartile. So they're not putting the effort in, but actually the employee experience they're creating, the workplace experience they're creating is very good. Professional services, financial, utilities, and insurance. Now, these organisations are dependent on their brand. They are strong brands, and the kudos of having that brand on the CV covers up a lot of what isn't happening in terms of their levels of engagement informing the workplace. But actually, it's the culture in those organisations that are shaping the workplace experience. But it does align to the employees' expectations. Okay, so it is what they expected. So maybe it's those large global brands. And they do the basics very well. And then top left, adventurous. So they're putting a lot of effort in, but they're not seeing the output. They're not seeing the bang for their buck. We see in here media, broadcasting, and a lot of the technology, a lot of the startup organisations. So these organisations and these sectors are recognising the importance of the workplace experience. And they recognise it's part of the employee value proposition. And they're putting a lot of money into it, but it's very much pay and pray. They're being seen to invest, seen to try and do the right things and place importance on it. But they're not actually getting it right, so they're not seeing that return on their investment. There's a lot going on around the digital experience, but it's not necessarily aligned to the full design intentionally of what that employee experience and workplace experience needs to look like. And then finally, top right-hand corner. These are the organisations, again, from this insight, from the qualitative insight, that are getting it right. We're seeing a lot of sectors around the software, so software as a service. It's the communication services, high technology, and some of those disruptor brands. So why are these guys getting it right? Why are they seeing that return for their investment? Why are they going to come out the other side of this long period of significant workplace change effectively? They've got a systematic approach. And what they mean by that is they are data and insight-led in their actions. It's not just intuitive. It's not listening to the people that speak in the loudest. It's not listening to the hippos. They recognise that one size doesn't fit all in the workplace, okay? With our diverse organisations, diverse employee populations, and they have to recognise that. And finally, they also understand that the workplace experience and the way they change and engage people needs to be people-led, not people-led, tech-enabled, not the other way around. And that is probably the perfect segue to hand over to Stephen.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to attempt to cover the really easy area of AI in 6 minutes, which is a bit of a challenge. But what I wanted to talk about around technology and AI in particular is about hype in the first instance and how people perceive change, how people challenge change, and how people worry about change, which is a big area. This gentleman here, the historic gentleman, if I may refer to him as that, is a guy called Ned Ludd, for the historians amongst you. So in the 19th century in England, he led the rebellion against the sewing machine because it was putting people out of work. Luddites is a term which is commonly used now. You all would have heard if you're a bit against technology. Rishi Sunak, if you remember back in October, had this curious exchange with Elon Musk about AI. And Elon Musk said something which made the 6 o'clock news. And I'm sure as soon as he said it, Rishi Sunak wished he hadn't said it, because he said the golden line of no one will need to work. There will not be a need for anyone to work in the future because AI is going to do everything. That made the printed media, the 6 o'clock news, and it drives all this worry and concern about, are there going to be jobs? Will I have a job? Will you have a job? What I thought about, and I considered technology and how people react to it, is back to how people have reacted to technology before. So that article there about the internet, there's some great articles you can look at how people perceived technology at first. People thought the internet was mad. Why would I want to type www dot and then go to something? I don't have a computer at home. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to connect with people outside of my circle? Back to what the team before were talking about. Text messaging. People thought that was crazy. Why would I want to text someone? If I want to speak to someone, I'll call them. If you think of yourself now, and me in terms of my personal life, I don't want anyone to call me ever, unless it's really important. I want to live my social life through WhatsApp. And then the New York Times recently unearthed this great article which had a question which we should all think about, which is, who wants to take their laptop to the beach? Because again, when the laptop came out, people said, why would I want a laptop? My work's at work. I don't want it to follow me around. But again, if you think of those three things, the laptop, the text messaging, and the internet, think how transformational that has been. Think of work without the internet now. It's just unimaginable, isn't it? But in terms of hype, one point I just wanted to raise before we come back to AI is the bottom left there and driverless cars. So about 6 or 7 years ago, that was our future. You may remember everyone was talking about the great future, heralding us to no one will need to drive again. And it was such a problem in North America because there's 41 million people in North America who are employed to drive lorries alone. Think of taxis, think of all the couriers and everyone else who is employed as a driver. Went to Congress, big debate. Well, what are we going to do with all these people? How are we going to retrain them? Who's going to pay for it? What will we do with them? If we fast forward 7 years, how many people do we think have been displaced due to autonomous cars? I think it's probably none. But AI is different. Maybe someone will stand here in 6 years' time and say, oh, do you remember AI? But I don't think so. It's driving huge change, significant change for employees, even basic things. You interact with Teams and you can see what Teams can do now versus what it could do 2 years ago and what it will do, in terms of annotating meetings, transcribing it, it arranges actions for you. Very quickly, it will do those actions for you. And then if you think of the more enterprise level of AI about managing risk and contracts and supply chain, it's huge. And it will be driven by the technology companies. If you think of Amazon, which generates $1 billion of revenue every 12 hours, they have access to these tools. And if you think of the opportunity for an organization like that to manage its supply chain, its fulfillment, its product selection, its contracts, all the way through to the customer experience, they're the kind of organizations that will drive the change. And then that will filter down to the workplace. So yeah, we need to embrace it. So this looks a bit ugly, doesn't it? Sorry, I've had some great pictorial slides so far, but this is a really useful tool that we use with clients now to try to get them to work through and understand what's on the right and what can be transformed in terms of technology, and then what goes to the left. So as one example, we are or have recently worked with the Scottish Parliament in Holyrood. Great team of people. Big FM function responsible for all manner of services around Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. They've got so many operations and tasks and things here in the bottom right. But what they want to do is they don't want to reduce people or change things. They want to automate what's on the right and then move the people to the left to drive and deliver workplace experience and other services. We stick hybrid in the middle because I still talk to clients who think hybrid needs to go away, which is, I think, mad. Like, why? Most people who I talk to don't want to be in an office 5 days a week, and they also don't want to be at home 5 days a week. The kind of organisations that you see trying to mandate that, I think, will ultimately fail. Getting people back into the office on a Friday for no clear purpose. What's the point? So on the right, and where we work with Scottish Parliament as an example, my clicker's not working. Is to map out everything that team does today, what they deliver, all the service contracts, everything it touches, into those 4 boxes. So it's quite rudimentary, but it works. And then you get them to think about what's in decline, what's growing, and what else do you think the team could do in terms of spending their time more fruitfully. Everything on the right can be transformed by tech, pretty much. If it's transactional, if it's repetitive, it can be learned by language. We don't need people taking, help desk requests by phone anymore. That kind of thing can change. And then where Scottish Parliament, as an example, but lots of clients want to get to, is moving the people to the left to enable that great workplace experience and that whole concept of workplace as a destination. Because I completely agree with everything what the team before said as well, in the sense that people want to connect with people, don't they? That's what it's all about. I hate working from home. I hated the pandemic in terms of working from home. If I'm at home for more than 4 days, I have to kind of go out. I don't like it. And it's very difficult, I think, to feel part of something when you're just sat on Teams calls all day at home. The day is very structured. If you go out the house, it's very difficult to have a day where nothing happens. Okay, and then penultimate slide from us. So this kind of builds back to data that Ian was talking about, and this is obviously quite generalized, not big on generalized statements, but I'll have to make one here in respect of what we see with clients is that everyone sees great purpose, I think, in the workplace, wants to invest in it, but of course there's this huge split in terms of budget and ability. So poor old healthcare is always at the bottom of everything, isn't it? But of course they've got budgetary challenges and they've got different focus. But we see great excitement and interest, in particularly in things like law firms, financial services, in banking, where they really want to attract talent, and keep people there. And the real kind of opportunity here is what's described in this box. If everything is underperforming on this data set, or barely performing, the opportunity to drive change is huge. And I think the best way that I've ever heard it described, which is a really simple sentence, and it gets people going because it disturbs people, is that your office is your competitor's opportunity. And if you think of it like that, and you talk to your stakeholders that actually, yeah, we've problems with recruitment, problems with retention, how can we make the office a destination? The opportunity to do great things with organizations is huge. Okay, so back, there's our friend again. So the last kind of 3 takeaways from Ian and I. So, yeah, the hippo. Interesting, important view, but not a view to build a strategy on. I think that's really critical, really key. Number 2, yeah, so much opportunity to differentiate with the workplace. I just keep coming back to that line, your office is your competitor's opportunity. I think you can really disturb senior stakeholders with that line and then use it to drive change. And then lastly, AI. So look, you know, you guys all know about it. You don't need me to tell you, but there is huge change coming, both in terms of how employees work, but how organizations work. And we need to embrace it. Absolutely need to embrace it. What I always think as well is that, you know, it's easier to change now because you want to than it is to change later because you have to. One's a lot easier than the other. So that's it from us. There's 2 QR codes at the end. So bottom left will link you to all the great data that Ian's talked about, the Chameleon report, and then you can follow us and link in with us in terms of workplace solutions and about what we're up to in terms of trying to shape this for our organization and for our clients. So thank you for listening.
So we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Any burning questions? Oh, look, right at the back there. Hello.
Hi, it's Sarah Bean from FMJ. One thing that you mentioned about the pioneers and sort of, you know, tech companies and things like that, I've been getting a lot of press releases and stuff through from all the co-working companies, and anecdotally they have a lot of these sort of startups who are using co-working spaces, but I'm wondering how that works in terms of this whole collegiate atmosphere. You know, anecdotally again, you hear people working in co-working spaces, but they don't know anyone who they're actually working with physically, because everything's connected via AI and online. So how do you sort of bring the two together?
So what's that last bit, sorry?
How do you bring they're in a physical place, but they're not physically with the people that they actually work with necessarily? How can people be brought together? And is co-working just a sort of a band-aid really on the fact that offices are shrinking?
I'd say I think there's a lot of different answers to that, Sarah. I think that the one I would highlight, which we hear a lot about, is we've lost in the co-working space and the disparate way we work. We've lost a lot of those rituals that we had before, those kind of intentional things that we did. Maybe they weren't always planned, but we did them. You know, we walked to coffee, we walked to lunch together, we had meetings, we celebrated success, we celebrated birthday. It's some of those things, I think, that even though there are still benefits of working in those third spaces and using some of those environments, it's very hard to replicate some of that stuff in terms of that emotional and social connection. So when we speak to organizations, it's when Optima throws up results, it's very rarely actually about things that need to spend money on. A lot of it is behavioural, and it's about how we get people to come together. Again, Nobi's presentation earlier, it sits right. But the rituals, I think, is a massive piece that we've really lost that emotionally connects people to each other and to the organisation.
Brilliant, thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. More questions? Got one down here.
I work in the legal space, and you talked about hippos. So our hippos are also our highest revenue earners, and they also own the business. So their voices are pretty loud. And what would your advice be on how to influence their views on the workplace?
Okay, so as Stephen said, we work a lot with law firms in legal and professional services. So without saying too much, I recognise your point in terms of fee earners and partners. So we're never going to change that culturally, right? There's a massive influence. What we can do, though, is we can look at those that aren't part of that group, and we can be representative of those. So I think when we deploy Optima in law firms, it is more focused on those that don't have that voice, and it's being able to put that on the table. So, because equally what you see is the senior people in organisations won't always agree, by the way. If you take leadership teams, they won't always agree on what the strategy is and what needs to happen. So when you present that data, which is why you've got pioneering, which is data and insight-led, it will shape and inform those opinions. I'm not saying they will always change, but I think you have to bring the missing part of the jigsaw to the table rather than trying to push against the tide. Is that diplomatic enough?
Yes.
Okay, right, thank you.
And recruitment, so they've got to attract the best talent, haven't they, from university? And one of the questions I'd think about is, well, where am I going to work? So if you don't have an office which is fit for purpose and fit for all, and it feels like a destination, feels like it's worth going to, how are you going to grow as an organisation? But yeah, we recognise that, don't we, Ian? God, that's a common one.
Thanks. Okay, we will just take that one last question then. Down at the front.
William Raby from Habit Action. Do you assess and interview or survey students that are going to be entering the workplace in the next 3 to 6 months coming out of universities out of interest?
No, interesting. No.
So no is the answer. What we do in terms of when we do deploy it, it's understanding that the level of tenure, so early careers are identified within the samples and whenever we deploy Optima. However, it is only those people who are, in employment in that workplace today. So the honest answer to your question is no, we don't look at those who are going to be coming into the future. But it's a great question and something for us to consider. Thank you.
No, that's fine. My phenomenon being that the workplace is always trying to play catch up with somewhere's talent because the understanding of expectation is being set in universities and places of learning. We've seen massively different environments in places of learning, which is preparing tomorrow's talent, essentially. What
we have seen, very quickly, I know we're running out of time, is first 6 and 12-month turnover of new employees, and typically they are the younger generations, has increased massively since hybrid. So they're not feeling that emotional connection with an organisation and a brand and the culture. Knowledge transfer, being around, again, the team spoke about this morning, how do you, the osmosis, being around people. So yes, they're still working in the organisation now rather than about to, but the turnover of that group is really high. Something's not working, quite quitting.
Interesting. And I always think we can learn from higher education institutions what's needed in the workplace and vice versa, actually. So let's give the guys one last round of applause. Thanks, Ian.